But I think what Orbit really need to do if they want to try and keep their chances for Worlds alive in this best of 5 scenario, they need to just fall back to their defaults of aggressive playstyle. We've seen it in the first and second game. They haven't really been playing that aggressive playstyle that they're known for. They've been going more towards that, we're going to play it a bit more paced with Obey, and we're going to kind of testing the waters. But I think they need to stop testing the waters and letting Obey let their draft really roll into its stride and just go ahead and engage.
But the problem was Obey was also doing a great job taking options away from QvoFred, taking away the Batz, taking away the Kwang. He's been known to be so successful with those two gods. So he needs to find a way to utilize some other picks to be able to start invading, because yet again, the second game, we didn't see much action or any kills up until yet again like the 15-minute mark when all the abilities were used onto Trixtank. So it's time now for Orbit to be able to be the first one to pull the trigger and look for these kills.
Now is the time. It seems like QvoFred's got a lot on his back. So does the entire team of Orbit. We're going to get into picks and bans for Game 3 here, potentially a closeout game for Obey, nonetheless. But we still do have something to mention. We've got the hi-rez Oceania Championship running through, and that's actually going to be a Paladins and Smite event. So that's coming up actually on November 26th and 27th. That'll start at 10 a.m. on twitch.tv/hi-rez-tv. So make sure to check that out, see what they're doing over there, and we will link in that promo. So making sure that you all understand there is still this program called Drops, and if you are watching, you are getting content potentially. So that just means as long as you watch the Smite Super Regional, you link your Twitch account to your hi-rez account, you will be able to potentially get some free in-game stuff. So it just depends. There's no guarantee on how it works, but you are going to, just by watching, have a chance to, when you next open up Smite, get some cool chests, some cool skins potentially, avatars. So make sure you definitely go ahead and link your accounts there.
And there's a lot of opportunity to get more of these chests, considering the fact that this set could potentially go into Game 5 if Orbit managed to pull things around. We'll see how it transitions, though, heading into picks and bans for Game number 3. I really want to see Orbit take away this Ymir.
I fully believe they're going to go ahead and do it after this Nemesis ban. If they permit the Ymir to go through again with how well Variety's been playing it, I really hope that they have a strategy for it, and they're going to opt to go for the Nemesis Terra bans that they've been making. And I don't want to say Obey are going to first pick Ymir, but I feel like it's going to come out in these top 3 picks.
Unless Orbit first pick the Ymir, which I don't think is going to happen, then Obey yet again are going to be able to control these mid to late game positioning battles around the Gold Fury, around the Fire Giant. And even like you mentioned before, the disengagers were also so crucial, not just the offensive plays, but this time around, we saw the Khepri being banned by Obey for this 3rd game. So now QvoFred has his comfort pick of the Batz.
Yeah, I know Kiva's probably pretty excited to go ahead and get that Batz pickup. And Batz is also something that is a very predominant pick in EU. They really like having that crowd control with the Batzel. And I think, if anything, it'll also be a pretty good pick in dealing with the Ymir, because hopefully if Variety CC'd out, if he does opt for that Ymir choice, then it's still going to make things a little bit hectic for Obey to try and get that control that they would want.
But then again, he also built so tanky, going for a very early Spirit Throw. We saw that in game number 1 on the Ymir, yet again locking that in. Been so successful for Obey, going for it 3 times in a row. So if I'm Orbit here, I'm looking at Variety, and I'm looking to camp that lane with Xaliea playing something also aggressive in the soul lane, just to be able to start invading the blue buffs and the speeds.
To get Variety off his game, that should be crucial for Orbit. They've got QvoFred on his Bot, so he's going to feel confident there. But Trixtank, he's looking like he has a decision, an important decision to be made. I know this lineup, this could mean everything. They are 1 game away of not going to Worlds here. They'll then be moved into the later games this week to see if they can make a wild card position. But this is very important, and looks like they're hovering over the Anhur.
Could be a flex pick, because yet again, that could be for Lawbster, that could be for Funballer. Funballer's been known to play one of these aggressive gods every now and then in the laning phase. Maybe that could be an option that Orbit explore, trying to really shut down Ataraxia if he decides to pick up Jing here.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's kind of interesting. I feel like if Jing is picked up here, this Anhur is most likely going to go into that duo lane on Funballer. just because of the fact that Anhur is probably one of the better gods in dealing with her in the laning phase, and it'll allow Funballer to have that aggression that he really wants, because with Freya, he does have to tone it back a little bit until he finishes the Fatalis and boots. With Anhur, he can go ahead and jump right into it.
Also in the mid lane, though, being paired up with Batz, if Lawbster were to play this on her, it would allow him to catch up to QvoFred if he decides to jump anywhere aggressively. The double jumps coming out there from Orbit could allow them to maybe net some early kills around the level 2 to 5 range. That would also be a lot of burst damage to maybe look for a very early first blood, because these past 2 games were pretty slow and very calculating coming out of these 2 teams.
Orbit looks focused, Funball there, pensive, trying to figure out what his team needs to grab in order to get a win on the board. Kukulkan will be banned away, as well as Jing Chen on the side of Obey Alliance, and they've still got a couple of bans remaining. What are these bans saying to you? They take away the Bacchus. Orbit still has another one. What are they looking to target here?
It seems that Obey really want to shut down Trixtank by banning away the Xing Chen and the Bacchus, but he's been known to play this Guan Yu in that guarding position. But it seems to me that Obey don't think that it's necessarily going to go to Trix, instead that it's going to go to Xaliea. So that's the option that Obey are taking away, whereas Orbit, they're leaning more about this Wombo combo coming out from the Najaka Kulkin. That's a lot of guaranteed damage.
I would personally kind of like to see an Athena or Gepik coming out for the side of Orbit here. I think they're probably 2 of the best Guardians left open on the table, and it would also allow Orbit to have that cleansing to get away from Obey's draft, because we know we have the stuns coming out from Fafnir, and that's a really good setup for this Ra that Obey has opted to go into. But it seems like Orbit are going to go more with the comfort side of things and picking up that Cabrakan, as well as having the flex pick option still on the table.
So Poseidon yet again getting locked in for Orbit. So it didn't really work out too well for them in the first game, considering they had the Ymir wall. And yet again, they're going to have not only Ymir walls, but Thor walls to boot.
Wow.
So it's going to be even more difficult for Lawbster in that mid lane. But I like the idea of being able to maybe throw out a Kraken every time that PrettyPriMe is going to be able to start channeling his own Searing Pain ultimate.
And this reminds me back of the old days, Ra versus Poseidon.
Very old school,
sweet.
yeah.
But there's a lot of, obviously, potential for both of these lineups. There's a little bit of a sustain. Again, Guan Yu providing that, whereas you see the Ra now providing that. Definitely different roles. Guan Yu probably going to last in that fight. If Ra is picked off too early, that sustain's going to go away big time, and that will obviously shift the tide. But for you, looking at this, who do you give the edge to in terms of drafting?
I like Obey's composition more here.
I'm definitely leaning more towards Obey's, considering the fact that Orbit don't have that Khepri, and I think the Khepri was one of the main reasons keeping them in the game as long as they were for Orbit.
I think this game we're going to see a lot of early fireworks. Thor onto CaptainTwig, Batz onto QvoFred. I want to see some invades.
I want to see it too.
Yes.
Let's see if the casters feel the same way. Aggro and Hindo up into Hindu up for game 3. Take it away, guys.
Hey Hindo, how are you today?
Not too bad, aggro.
Hey, it would have been Agru, would have been the right one.
Same thing. Obey. On paper, they have the best lineup.
I mean, this is like, this is Obey. If you would have come in and asked me what do they want to play, I'd tell you that. Yeah, PandaLike wants to play Fafnir, Variety wants to play Ymir, Ataraxia wants to play Jingwei, PrettyPriMe probably wants to play some Ra. CaptainTwig is not the premier Thor player, but he's definitely.
Oh, he's got a solid Thor.
His Thor is very, very solid. This draft from Obey looks very strong. I mean, I cannot believe how well they've played so far.
Well, the boys of Orbit here are down 2 games. They need to win 3 in a row, starting, obviously, right now. If they lose this, they'll go down into group play, which will happen on the Friday and Saturday this week. But they don't want to do that because that's a lot harder run to try and get to the World Championships than just winning 3 games against Obey, which sounds easier. Can you say that?
This is the first. Obey won their first game against Orbit in God knows how long.
Yeah.
Earlier today in game 1, and then they did it again. They doubled down and did it twice in a row. This means that Orbit, like you mentioned, has to reverse sweep here. They need 3 in a row. And to be fair to their draft, they also have a lot of comfort picks. Funball on this Anhur. He's been the real standout player for me for Orbit thus far. Can he really abuse Ataraxia in lane this time? And then Qvo on this Batz. I mean, that is the QvoFred god. This is, if I need a win and QvoFred's my jungler, I want him on Hunbats.
Really surprised by Orbit's start there. They were very worried about a potential invade coming out from Obey there. So they started their blue buff, transitioning to the speed instead. Lawbster will hit mid lane a second later than PrettyPriMe, who has a bit of advantage, but the Whirlpool comes into play. And because of that, Lawbster will clear at the same time.
Two old school gods with really, really solid clear in the mid lane. Both can basically full clear at level 2. Poseidon can full clear at level 2 100% of the time with Whirlpool and Tidal Wave.
Well, the dance on the right and Harpies begin for now. The elementals spawn, and because of that, you can see them trying to trade off and work out who gets them. Not sure which way they went. Overall, their net worth kind of instigates to me that it should have been Qvo.
And that is that Lawbster using both skills there to try and secure those. Does have the Tidal Wave available now, but doesn't have that Whirlpool. That Whirlpool's got a little bit of a longer cooldown.
Well, it's going to be Cabrakan in the support role. We've not mentioned that just yet, but Trix took a lot of free poke there, and he's actually going to, with the full minion wave, put pressure onto PandaLike, and he's going to force Ataraxia into body block, who gets stunned and forced to purify. Impale could be available soon here for him, and there's the Impale as well. The knocker from Jing is going to push Trixtank back as well. Everybody stands for now, but the health bars of 3 of those members got violated.
But Twig is here. He doesn't have the wall, though. Not going to be able to find anything on that gank. Yeah, only level 2. So, and the analyst wanted Fireworks. How's that for Fireworks early on in the duo lane?
Well, to be fair, give credit where it's due to Orbit's Funballer here. He's the only person that turned up in both games for me on the Freya, now gone for the Anhur. He wants aggression early on here, aggro. He knows he was probably going to end up against the Jing, and he walked right into it going, I want Anhur, I want to fight early mid.
And there's no reason not to give it to him. You're right. I mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it right there. Funball has been the standout player for Orbit so far for me, especially with how much talk that we had about QvoFred, you know, being at the top of the world potentially as far as junglers go. But really, it's been Funball doing an excellent job on this Hunter, and I like the idea that Orbit has. Give him that early to mid-game god. Late game, he was getting there as Freya, but it wasn't quite enough. Let's see if he can keep Ataraxia down, because Orbit as a whole has had a very difficult time handling Ataraxia on this Jingwei.
And I think we'll see Funballer do what he did last game and the game before with the same sort of standard. The difference here needs to be, though, the other boys need to step up. Lawbster, very, very quiet so far in this tournament, and he needs to make a big impact, especially playing something like Poseidon.
If you would have told me that in 3 games, Lawbster's 3 picks would be Poseidon, Izanami, Poseidon. I mean, that's unbelievable. So maybe that it just isn't quite there with this god pool right now, or not overall god pool, because we all know that Lawbster can play everything in the entire game, basically, but just these picks just don't seem to have had as much synergy as they were looking for.
Well, he's a mid lane opposition here, PrettyPriMe, gone for the Raw. The first time we're seeing Raw today.
Picks or bans.
Picks or banned. I was expecting to see it a little bit more often here, aggro, but this is the first time we're seeing it.
And this is definitely a mid-game composition for Obey through and through. They just want to get to like 20 minutes, and we saw it time and time again with them during their group stages. They'll lose the fights early on, and then they hit 20 minutes, and all of a sudden they flip the switch, and it's all them, all the time, right after that. That's kind of what happened in game 1. Not quite 20 minutes, but still, around that time period, they just start to really roll, and that's what PrettyPriMe loves to do on this Raw. He went for this, looks like it's going to be a Warlock/Rush. He loves to do this.
Well, the big key here as well is you see the invade coming out from CaptainTwig on the right-hand side here, looking to steal away the blue buff. It's still being held, but with the spot of Lawbster and Qvo coming, he's like, nope, I'm not having none of that. He was trying to make sure Variety got the experience from it too. And in the end, the knockback from Lawbster paid off. I don't know if he intended that, but it worked out great.
Completely intentional there. Completely intentional. Knocks the buff away. Really, really strong play from Lawbster. And again, you see the Wrath picked up by PandaLike. That came in so clutch for Obey in game 2. They were able to sneak a Gold Fury away right in front of Trixtank's face. They were able to get a Fire Giant with 4 members of Orbit still healthy. I expect them to try to use it for the same effect this time.
And whenever you see Trixtank running around on the Cabrakan now, him and QvoFred both like to play. As you can see, it's 2 walls from the side of Obey versus a wall and a pillar from the side of Orbit. And there's one of the walls coming into play right now, and the second one comes out too, but the Fair No Evil is going to connect to the Variety. Crush! Just the Kraken comes out. Qvo gets credit for the kill. Twig is in the sky now, but I doubt he's going to want to go in on full health members of the boys of Orbit.
Just picking up that farm that's left over in that right-hand lane, and we saw that was the game plan for Orbit in game 1, was pick this Poseidon and kill Variety over and over and over again. I think they only got 1 kill on him in that game, so they're going to need to do a better job than that, but they're already starting off on the right foot. Pre 5 minutes, they make the rotation over there, they commit their two biggest teamfight ultimates in Fear No Evil and the release the Kraken, but it pays off. First Blood goes the way of QvoFred.
And here was the issue they had in the first game against Variety's Ymir. Not only the walls, but the fact that he was able just to build however he wanted because he was against a Sobek, so he didn't have to go for physical defense first of all. This time against Guan Yu, he does have to go for some physical defense, which means that the Krakens are gonna make an impact. With more.
Exactly. Last time I think he went for Genji's guard early on, just some sort of magical protection up against that Kraken. So Orbit recognized.
It was more for Sobek, right? But it also influenced the Kraken.
And it was doubly effective. Here, you make him make that choice. He's going into physical protection early on, wants to have that up against his lane opposition, as well as the junglers, QvoFred. You don't want to be taking quite as much damage from those overhand smashes, but overall, it does make him a little bit more vulnerable to Lawbster on this Poseidon.
Well, this is the same sort of start for Orbit in Game 1 that we saw of this best of 5. Game 2 was a different story where it was Obey who got off to a good start. Xaliea on the Guan Yu here, who it's not an easy matchup to go against Ymir, but he did such good work in it last game and not dying, giving away too much in terms of farm. Why not just put him back on it?
Exactly. We talked about it, how it's kind of curious to see a character like Guan Yu up against Ymir that can have their main clear ability interrupted, but Xaliea did so well on it last time. I have no problem giving it to him again. And Xaliea did his job last game. He was Mr. Healbot. He was pumping out tons and tons of healing. It just wasn't enough.
And the other thing about that as well, I guess, is when you look at the jungle, QvoFred on the Fear No Evil hub Batz this game, those Fear No Evils make a bigger impact onto Ymir than you'd like to think, because even though you throw the wall down, the Fear No Evil's going to keep ticking, and if he pushes him into a wall like he just did, it's going to cause him an issue.
He used his own wall against him, right there on that first gank. That's the dream, is to push someone into a wall with Fear No Evil.
Wall not going to connect from CaptainTwig there after PANDALIKE did hit the hammer overall, right-hand side. You can see QvoFred is taking the blue buff, going to give that one over to Xaliea at 7 minutes in the game. And a Warlock Sash is now completed on PrettyPriMe.
And this is what PrettyPriMe likes to do on this Raw. I mentioned it earlier. He really likes to go for this Warlock Sash. And he plays for a very mid-game style of Raw. He's got the Raw HP now, pun intended, that he can use to try and stay alive in these extended engagements.
Well, there could be a collapse here from Lawbster and Trixtank coming around the corner, but with Variety in the jungle too, and the ping's raining down. Trixtank just eats some poke for free, and everybody just resets.
Last time, like Taco mentioned on the desk, Khepri was a big reason why Obey wasn't able to full commit onto the Cabrakan jungle. This time, you don't have that Khepri. You've got the Cabrakan support, and so if he puts himself in a bad spot, he could get punished much harder than he was last game.
Trixtank happy to beat the hammer there from PANDALIKE just to make sure he could get those harpies for his team, get a bit more gold and experience to their favor, which is around 700 gold now at the moment in terms of gold.
And that's QvoFred has been the big one. He's farming very, very well. You can see that he's up about 800 gold on his oppositional jungler, CaptainTwig. A lot of that thanks to that first blood, of course, but still, Qvo looks so comfortable on the Batz all the time. I mentioned it earlier on. I love this pick in this game.
And for the time being, then everyone's going to go back to farming. Back harpies being done. Red buffs have just spawned for both teams as well. Same sort of pace as every game so far. Is the first Gold Fury pretty much aggro when we actually see some initiation?
And both times, the first Gold Fury has kind of just been taken away without a whole lot of engagement.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the second Gold Fury that really kicks off the party. And no surprise, like you mentioned, this is exactly what I was expecting coming into this. Both teams have solid compositions in the mid game. I like Obey's composition in the mid game a little bit more. It's just a matter of if Xaliea is going to be there, because Xaliea, with that conviction heal, I talk about it all the time, that can be that amount of sustain can be a win condition in itself. The problem is this time around, Obey have an answer to that sustain. It's sustain of their own. Solar Blessing is just as strong as Conviction out of combat. In combat, I'd rather have the Guan Yu because it's on a much lower cooldown. It's not, you know, and you don't have to stand there and get the ticks of the heal. It's just a big burst.
We can see the ward wars that were going on over by that Gold Fury there. Both teams trying to vie for control of the Gold Fury area. And the big key there for me is around the left-hand harpies of the side of Orbit. PANDALIKE has dropped a ward just inside the mid area a couple of times now, just between mid lane and going into the jungle. So that sentry ward that's placed down by Orbit on the left-hand side isn't catching it any single time, but they can still keep an eye on the rotations coming out from Orbit.
The rotations, as well as the fact that a lot of times you'll see Hunbat's players sit in that camp, wait for the enemy mid laner to push up, and then hop over and drop that ultimate. So it gives them a little bit more information, as well as you see PANDALIKE hang out there himself quite a bit. He likes to be the one throwing the hammer over the wall, trying to get the stun, the cheeky little stun in the mid lane.
Well, at the moment, Funballer has been quite contained in this lane so far. Ataraxia hasn't really fought him so far. He did earlier on in game 1 on the Freya against the Jingwei. Jingwei was a little bit more aggressive there, but this time round, I think Ataraxia is realizing he's against an Anhur. He's going to be a bit more respectful.
And that's no surprise to hear that Ataraxia is playing a lane passively. That's kind of what he's known for. The only thing is whenever he's on Jingwei, it's kind of the opposite. He's willing to dash in all the time.
Well, here we go again. Gold Fury pulled, Obey in control, have a Wrath available as well. The boys of Orbit show their face for a second with Trixtank's big old shields coming out, and immediately they back away.
No shell or a curse for Orbit right now, pre-level 12 on all of their members outside. Actually, hold that, 3 members already level 12 for Orbit, but none of those guys are probably going to be picking up a curse. In fact, you see the Teleport and Meditation be the 2 relic choices for Xaliea, doubling down on that healing in combat.
And I think if our teams go back and get the relics now, we could see a little bit of a fight over the Gold Fury, but it's a moment, it's the left-hand Harpy's being looked at with QvoFred turning up though, and that Fafnir Weaver, they've got to be very respectful here. Funballer hanging around the corner too, and that should secure them for the boys of Orbit.
Funballer being there while Ataraxia is farming up the back Harpies definitely dissuades Obey from playing aggressive in that sort of scenario. Even right now, I mean, this is when Anhur is at his potential strongest. He's got his boots completed. That passive is just so strong at this stage in the game, giving you free. It's basically like a mini executioner on his auto attacks already built in. He's sitting at level 13 right now. Doesn't have his executioner started quite yet, but his boxing potential with that Ichaival is very high.
Well, Gold Fury pulled again by Obey, and Cuvo first to show up. It looks like they're committing here a little bit heavy here, Obey, and they will get the Gold Fury. QvoFred unable to get his ultimate off in time to stop anything from happening, and so everybody limps away, and Obey get a Gold Fury for free.
They do force out the teleport from Variety. He used his TP to get there just in case Orbit wanted to try and force the fight after that Gold Fury falls down. But it opens up the right side. Xaliea getting significant tower damage onto that solo lane side.
Well, CaptainTwig's here with Variety too, so it won't take 2 seconds for those minions to be removed from the tier 1 tower, as Variety is currently trying to remove the blue buff, but he might get it removed himself. The wall is going to keep him pinned in the whirlpool for now, but Variety's in a bit of trouble. Freezes Trixtank, wall double tap, hits Lawbster, and CaptainTwig goes to the sky.
CaptainTwig is doing such a good job of saving Variety. He comes crashing down on nobody. Wall blocks off Xaliea for now. Ataraxia is here, but Funball is not. That's why you see the full disengage from Orbit. Variety was completely stuck in that blue buff, but it was just CaptainTwig pushing pressure onto Lawbster, making sure that he can't step up and use that Kraken for free. Excellently played there between the solo and jungle.
And also the fact that rotation could come into play as well. And that's the big key there as well as he walked away from that. Same time though, Xaliea did use his ultimate a little bit prematurely there, a little bit worried by the walls from Variety. Rightly so after the first 2 games.
Yeah, when you see a wall come out for Variety, you just assume it's going to be perfect. So this means that CaptainTwig could really dunk down on this side. You could CC chain that Guan Yu, place the wall in between him and his tower, which means that Dash wouldn't be able to get him there easily. Could be a gank potential on this right-hand side, but with the way CaptainTwig has played ever since game 1, where he did try and gank Xaliea a lot, I would be kind of surprised if he did spend even more time over there. He's really been focused on just farming up. In fact, if you take a look at CaptainTwig's player damage, I'd expect that it's probably going to be fairly low. In fact, the lowest in the game.
Yeah, not a real shock there. And that's kind of his playstyle, is generally set up utility for the most part until the mid to late game as well. If you can cause a distraction, that will help them out. The wall going to stop the opportunity for them to steal those away, although some damage from Lawbster may have helped them out a little bit. The wall coming down from Thor as well will slow the advance of Orbit into the enemy jungle.
Obey just looks so comfortable playing with this Ymir at all times. Yeah, they just know exactly what's happening. It looks like a couple members thinking about coming around the back, but not going to be able to find anything except for a little bit of damage from CaptainTwig.
Left-hand Harpy's about to spawn too. Funballer done a very good job of keeping pace with Ataraxia in this lane as well. We mentioned how good Jingwei is. The net difference in gold between them is generally just separated because of the Gold Fury.
You can see the difference in their builds, though. Funball going for this Aussie means that he wants to box you a little bit more in lane. He's got more sustain than Jingwei does. He's got the lifesteal now from that, a little bit of extra penetration, but not as much power and attack speed that Executioner is giving to Ataraxia. And Ataraxia doesn't really like going lifesteal on Jingwei, because if you get poked out, you're just back. You're just back and fly in.
You talk about actual lifesteal. What about sustain and anti-heal as well? Last game, we saw none on the side of Obey, but they still won the game against the Guan. This time around, though, Orbit recognize they're up against the Rod. You can already see some filtering through.
Pestilence already picked up for Xaliea. No second relic picked up by Trixtank yet. It's up to him to grab a shell if they're going to have one.
Is it shell or is it curse? Because you can't go blink because you've already got one on Cuvo, right?
Yes.
You can't go for a second blink. I mean, you could, but then you're losing so many teamfight relics.
It's a tough choice here. I would assume that Trixtank is going to go for the shell, though we don't see a sprint for Obey quite yet. PandaLike hasn't hit level 12.
True.
So if he does elect to go for the shell, even though CaptainTwig has picked one up, with CaptainTwig picking up the shell for Obey, I assume that PandaLike's going to be going for a sprint to counteract any potential curse.
Gotcha. And that's a big key there as well. I think it could be a battle between the two supports about who buys what, first of all, I guess. See what the other one buys and then counteract it to an extent. If you go curse, you can go sprint instead.
That's what I was thinking, though. I noticed that PandaLike was standing at level 11, so he still hasn't gotten that opportunity. Trixtank hasn't backed since he hit level 12, I don't believe, so we could see him wait it out. Maybe if we don't see a sprint and we see a second shell or a meditation, there's no meditation for the side of Obey, then we can see that curse picked up.
Well, 45 seconds until the next Gold Fury spawns, and that's where we've seen fireworks both games so far. Xaliea versus Variety. This matchup was the same as game 1, and neither of them died in that matchup straight up. Not a real surprise to see that overall. Xalia's doing a good job of matching pace, though.
Xalia's KD was, what, 7 or something like that? Over 7, possibly, during the group stage lands. He was absolutely lights out with his KDA positioning. All that sort of stuff, so no surprise to see him holding his own yet again.
Nowadays, he's walking into a Ymir from Variety or a Tyr. They're the two that I can say pretty much he'll go to one of those two.
Yeah, that's the thing, is Variety's really great on those, but how great is he otherwise? Lawbster and Trix want to go aggressive. Xalia's been the one beating Variety here, but not enough.
Blink from Variety, wall comes in, but it's not a great wall this time. Very rare we get to say that about Variety, but Blink from QvoFred, fear no evil. Immediately Twig recognized it and took the ultimate to the sky. Variety's ultimate to zone them back away as Twig goes in on Cuvo, gonna force a purification. Trixtank trapped in an awkward spot as a Kraken does nothing. No real damage done to the front line of Obey, thanks to a superior shell.
Xaliea now caught in the wall. Ataraxia is here and made the rotation. He's still going too. Forces Cuvo up over that wall. Funball finally here in the mid lane, but this is what Nate is so good
got
at.
stunned and forced to purify. Impales back, but dropped to half health again. Double tap on Lawbster will make him turn tail for a second. And Obey, the right time for that fight with Variety's Blink rotation, pays off because the Gold Fury is exposed.
And that's no coincidence. Wrath gonna be up in a dozen seconds. Should be right on time to secure this Gold Fury. If Orbit does try and come and contest it, it looks like they're just gonna give it up instead. And you called it out right away. The shell from CaptainTwig was perfect. That could have been a game-turning Kraken right there.
For me, what it was I saw the Kraken and went, why is no one dead? Oh, shell.
Not only the shell, but we talked about how the buff to Gem of Isolation makes it more viable on Poseidon in the mid lane, but I still don't know if second item is the slot for it. It still is a little bit more in the utility section.
What would you want in second item then instead?
A Bancroft's Talon could have been good. I know that I usually am the one talking down Bancrofts, but Bancrofts, if you just want raw damage on Poseidon, you could even go for an early penetration item, like an early Spear of the Magus, to really make sure you're doing true damage, and then into the gem to make sure that you're just trying to maximize how much damage you're going to be doing with that Whirlpool combination. That could contribute to it as well, but overall, I think the shell was the big thing that prevented that Kraken from really turning that fight in Orbit's favor.
And it puts Obey into another good spot again. They're 2 games up here. This game will get them to the World Championships. CaptainTwig could potentially be going to Worlds for the 3rd time in a row.
CaptainTwig is at every LAN. That's the idea. Like, if you're a European, you're going to LAN, you're like, all right, well, at least I'll see Twig there.
Well, here we go. Twig's here right now, and Funballer's about to find him here as well. The hammer hits, the wall hits, the crit hits, and Ataraxia claims the life, and Twig's like, you what, son? You want to go to Worlds? Me too.
Variety in a ton of trouble on this right-hand side,
Great
though.
timing.
Uses that, but the Kraken is here. No shell for him this time. Gonna get knocked back.
Great
and the
wall. Great
keeps him
back. Lazy back. That's right. You're losing it. Right, this is a bad mistake from Orbit, though. We're laughing about it, but they lost a tier 1 tower in left. They're going to lose a tier 2 tower in the left-hand side, too. And that was all down to Variety baiting them, messing around with them, and the boys of Obey fell for it as well.
Keeping them busy forever. ever. Big rotation, but all they get out of it is a tier 1 tower and a kill, whereas Obey, like you mentioned, they get a kill, a tier 1 tower, and a tier 2 tower for their pick on the left-hand side.
Can we just go to the gold? I want to see the gold between the two teams because I think that's going to be really key. Look at the spikes. The first one, I believe, was the Gold Fury that brought it back to even at the 9-minute mark. And then the second one is the dip of the second Gold Fury. And then it's trailed further thanks to those 2 towers going down.
So we saw CaptainTwig do a little taunt spam earlier on the left-hand side. This is PandaLike.
Here we go.
This is all you need to see from PandaLike. This is what he does all the time. I know for a fact that pretty much everyone in Europe just insta-mutes this guy as soon as they get in game.
This is about tilting now. This is what the boys of Obey are trying to pull onto Orbit as well. Make them tilt a little bit. You've got a 2-game lead over, let's be honest, probably the best looking team out of Europe for a while in Orbit, other than Energy, obviously. But I mean, these guys have really come up to show Orbit, but right now, Obey, they're trying to tilt them even more.
4,000 gold lead, 2-2 go the kills, but the objective damage has really been in the favor of Obey.
And this is the issue with PandaLike, and he's got to be careful with this because, yeah, they're in a lead. Yeah, he's baiting them and causing them issues, but if he gets caught, it could spell disaster, just like Trixtank got caught there. That wall is lasting forever, and Trix did not like it that much. Into the sky goes Twig.
He's looking for Trixtank, possibly. Sprint is popped, not on the mark, but the wall is good. Finds a double tap onto 2. Snipe off the mark from PrettyPriMe.
The sustain coming back through, though, from the boys of Guan. Trixtank are left alone thanks to that wall on the pillar, too. Desert Fury from Funballer did absolutely zilch. It's 3-2, the way of Obey.
And here comes the sustain out of PrettyPriMe, no doubt about it. Ataraxia and him, it's actually going to be splitting up the map. Surprised we don't see Obey try and push down a tower here as 5. They're 5-on-4. They have the sustain that can match the sustain out of Xaliea, but CaptainTwig is backing.
They seem to be playing just around Variety the whole time. The only times we've seen engagements is when Variety drops a wall. And then until the wall comes back available, if the wall misses, we back away and wait again.
And you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Variety on this Ymir has been so good. Doesn't want to get healed, I guess. Not really worried about
Wall
it.
double tap and laser beam of death coming out onto QvoFred there, but he'll leap away for now. Has a Guan use, so can sustain back up when Guan actually joins the team again. The Whirlpools will slow these minions down a little bit. Don't forget it's Gem of Isolation, but it's all about looking for the perfect walls, and there's 2 of them now on the side of Obey.
But Trixtank has respawned and is now back, so that 5-on-4 opportunity that Obey had is now gone. They're going to split up and continue to farm the map. A little bit of indecision there from Obey. PrettyPriMe and Ataraxia just stood there and took like 3 waves in middle by themselves, while the rest of the team was getting organized and getting there, and it means they don't get anything off that pick.
Well, the third goal view of the game is about to spawn. We're about 18 seconds out, I should say. Wrath available and online this time for PandaLike as well. We did see the curse come out from Cabrakan. Trixtank did pick up the curse this game just to try and deal with the healing coming out from Ra, but it's only good for team fights.
It's only good for team fights, and even still, Ra's just want to sit in the back far enough away. He'll use the purification. He can kind of get out of dodge, immune that slow with the sprint coming out of PandaLike, which he did pick up.
Yeah, we're going to mention the sprint. So that does counter the curse straight away. Not the anti-heal, right? But it does counter the slow.
And that's the idea, is you just want to get rid of the slow, and then you can back up, wait for the curse effect to go away, and drop that heal, and it basically is completely null and void. Plus, like I mentioned, this means that Orbit does not have a shell. We've seen how big that shell has been for Obey in this matchup. No shell on the side of Orbit.
Well, Gold Fury pulled for a second there, and Orbit just hanging around Trixtank mainly, and he's got to be careful of the walls coming down for Variety. That's why he seems to speed up a little bit. Right-hand side, the Harpy's going to go the way of Twig as well. He'd be thankful for that. The Gold Fury's going to go down here for free.
There it is. Wrath, man. Orbit has
not...
but
look at this. The Fire Giant's been pulled. Let's listen into Orbit's comms as they look to steal this away.
Nice one.
Get out, get out.
Nice one.
Let's go.
Careful, get out. They're gonna fight.
This one.
Go that way. Groove up.
We might have to let mid
Commit.
go.
Commit.
Yeah, we're trying, but we have to walk around.
You have meditation?
I have meditation, yes. I'm coming ASAP. Almost there.
We're here.
Alright.
Yeah.
Going here.
Get out.
I need help then. We can curse down. Help him, Fred.
Help, hand it low.
He's looking for you, Fred.
Go to Fred.
Hammer down.
It's fine.
I almost killed that,
I
right?
should have stayed with Love.
I don't know. It's fucking good.
Like, we just all went rotate. Can we push
Don't
something
go
though?
into
We
the
can push
jungle.
something though.
Ymir here?
Ymir, kill.
Well, aggression coming out from the boys of Obey there as they do manage to take out QvoFred. PrettyPriMe under a lot of pressure, forced to purify away. Lawbster will take out Variety in this fight, though, as this is actually going the way of Orbit. I don't know how. The Fire Giant comes into play.
Huge call there. Funball loves these sneaking away the Fire Giant calls, and he does it yet again. We saw why are they giving up the Gold Fury? It's because we're on the bigger objective. Obey, we're on the Fire Giant. They trade out 1-for-1. Quvo falls in exchange for Variety, but the most important thing are these towers.
Gets the gold lead back in their favor if they can, or at least even it up. You can see the gold disparity right now is still around 6,000. Well, this will chip away at it with the tier 2 towers going down as well, and answer back some of that map presence on top of that. One thing I saw though, I go, oh, one thing I heard, I should say, comms weren't clean. One was saying go in, one was saying go out. Like, pick a call, man. Pick a call.
Well, it worked out in the end, didn't it? They trade out 1-for-1, like I mentioned, but again, it's those objectives. And look at the golden hand. You've got 3,000 gold between 3 members, basically. And this means that on this next back, it's going to be a lot easier for Orbit to continue to push with this Fire Giant. And it's Lawbster. We know the one Kraken got basically negated by that shell, but overall, his positioning has been very, very strong. His whirlpools have been on the mark, and the Kraken there, while wasn't impactful, the spread out AoE slow control zoning that Poseidon can bring was very, very relevant. I think he's sitting top of the player damage charts right now, 2, 0, and 1. Looks like he might be going directly for a Rod of Tahuti, possibly a Chronos Pendant, trying to get a little bit more CDR.
I'm seeing player damage there, and the one surprising factor is Funballer's player damage here. Ataraxia's just not fought him at all. He's not allowed Funballer to fight him, and by that you can see it's 4.4k. He's just out-rotated him, and yeah, he played Freya 2 games, looked fantastic. This game, he's not been able to make an impact on Anhur just yet, but the game's still going.
Oh yeah, he doesn't care. They're winning this game right now, and well, right around winning this game, and that's much more important to him than his player damage.
Well, you saw CaptainTwig in the mid lane there, and he's been forced back to basically impale, hits onto Panda like half health for Panda, and immediately leaps away, does Funball, and makes sure the hammer ult from CaptainTwig does not connect.
That's big. Now Funball not in nearly as much danger in the backside. There's that slow, big
but they come into the backside at the same time. Ataraxia forced out. QvoFred very low. PandaLike on zoning duty, keeping the carries away as the wall from Twig will slow down the defensive option from Orbit. Freeze onto Trixtank is good, but Trix is still strong enough to survive and escape the ultimate. Funballer takes out PandaLike. The knockup won't hit Variety, but Variety's one more hit. Xaliea forced out, however, and Funballer cannot find the in-hand thanks to PrettyPrime's body blocks.
How is Variety alive
body
right
blocks.
now? Throws the wall. Phoenix still pretty healthy, though, with the sustain from the Fire Giant and Xaliea. It will eventually fall. Trixtank as well was so low for so long in that engagement. Perfect jukes from both. Sprint coming in big there for Trixtank. They get the left-hand Phoenix, which is the best one that you can get, and they get out.
I was a little bit worried about Ataraxia there. That's why I'm was going to like he's going to swing in and go for a Grank. Well, the boys of Obey want to push forward here a little bit and try and cut off the defense if they can, or find some farm. And Orbit wisely sticking together and manually going back to base. No lazy back in this time round. I tell you what, though, Dignitas, if you watched the Super Regionals last year, this is a repeat of last year, where, you know, Orbit were pretty much out of it, and then 2 throws, which I couldn't class it as a throw just yet, but they gave away free Fire Giant.
I'm sure it's in their mind, but Obey, like we mentioned last time, just has so many veteran voices on that squad. I think that they're still in a pretty good spot to take this game. They've still got a slight gold lead, though 2,000 gold at this stage in the game. It's an even game.
And they lost to Phoenix game 1 as well, and still came back to win. So don't count your chickens before the hatch just yet for either team here, as for all intents and purposes, you can see by experience, the game's pretty much even.
We haven't really seen a big snipe out of PrettyPriMe yet, and that's one way that they could really come back into this game very quickly. I love the build coming out of PrettyPriMe, except for the fact that he doesn't have that really, really important Rod of Asclepius. I love the Celestial Legion Helm trying to negate the crits coming out of Hunbats with his passive, as well as the crits coming out of Funballer, who's gone for a full crit build here. I like the idea, but and then he needs the penetration. It's just like awkward. When you go for Warlock Sash as Raw, it just puts you in an awkward spot sometimes.
I mean, keeps you a little bit tankier, yeah, but the Rod of Asclepius, we've seen a lot of teams picking it up as one of the first major items. Not only does it give you mobility, but the extra healing sustain that can come into play will really make an impact.
A solid amount of power as well. The passive very strong, like you mentioned, and the movement speed is one of the big ones. So he's trading out. They're both survivability options, but you're losing that sustain option as well.
Well, Jing on the left-hand side of the map now, dealing with fire minions, which is allowing Orbit to group up on the right-hand side and look for the tier 2. Don't forget, we will be looking for Ataraxia to come in, but they're engaging on Variety. He ults in place, but Variety's dead. He's dead. He's dusted. But what about the boys of Orbit? They have to retreat now because they're under the tower. Trixtank taking a lot of poke, and Ataraxia is here, and Twig's in the sky.
He showed up. Twig comes crashing down.
One
Doesn't
place.
find anyone, though. Ataraxia getting low thanks to Desert's Fury. PandaLike not letting it
Good
go
impale.
just yet.
Big impale from Funballer just helped out Lawbster there. He was in a world of hurt for a second. And now Funballer on the front side going to force the airstrike out of Ataraxia. The sustain from Prime was used too far forward. They don't have a sustain for a few more seconds here. So that's going to allow the boys of Orbit to go in again.
Another 1,500 gold here, gonna go the way of Orbit. This will put them right about tied. Overall, though, like I mentioned, this game was, for all intents and purposes, already tied. 400 gold, less than 1,000 experience at 29 minutes.
QvoFred got away with a lazy back there just about. If Ataraxia would have seen him before that ward, it could have been a different story. But now it's Obey who control the Fire Giant pit because of reinforcements. And Orbit trying to go back to base. Good impale, sorry, good pillar, I should say. But it did force his purification because he got caught by the wall.
But that possibly saved some lives because Ataraxia was looking to go in aggressively. Fire Minions pouring in on the left-hand side. Ataraxia!
No airstrike this time, but agility will come into play. Cavalry charge, not going to get stopped by the wall. The horse jumps over it. Gallopy gallop, but now he's in trouble himself. Whirlpool comes into play as the Sanctuary's dropped. You can't jump over walls, Ataraxia. Funballer hits him with the impale.
Just even with all of the mobility available to him with Jingwei's kit, not quite enough to get out there. Variety on this left-hand side trying to push down that and save that left-hand Phoenix.
We can see a quick pause coming out into this game as well at 30 minutes in. Variety was on the left-hand side there, as you could see, and he was dealing with the Fire Minions coming in, but I guess obviously we'll see what's going to go on with that pause at the moment between the two. 6-4, Fire Giant still stands. Phoenix is about to respawn on the left-hand side.
And that was a really great wall from CaptainTwig. Almost save Ataraxia's life, but without that airstrike like we saw him forced to use on the right-hand side, like I said, when Ataraxia is on any god except for Jingwei, he's extremely passive, almost to a fault, probably to a fault.
I should say, no, his position is generally very good in all team fights.
Yes.
Apart from on Jingwei, where he goes a bit more out of position is what I want to say.
Just a little bit too much there. Probably didn't need to airstrike, but because of the pathing, he went wide around that rock instead of staying tight to it so he could get around and try and dodge those skill shots. He forced it there, and then he has to use a purification, and overall, a little bit too much there from Ataraxia, and that's a rare misstep from him, like you mentioned, in those team fights. But for me, Funball is starting to turn it around here in the late game. Like we mentioned, he's picking this on her for the early game pressure that he can provide in the mid game. But
I'm not so sure personally. I first thought that way, but then watching this game as it's gone on, I think he wanted to deal with the Ymir a little bit better. He can leap over the walls. He can also use his Desert Fury if his leap isn't available to block the freeze. And the freeze wall combo is where they've been having problems.
Plus, he's giving them a wall of their own, basically, with that obelisk. Yeah. Ataraxia wanted to be aggressive there, and he could have maybe gotten squeaking through that corner and could have really turned on the gas pedal while the rest of Orbit was still coming back from base. But that pillar just like knocked Jingwei out of midair, hit the speed buff wall as well, and that allowed that kind of turnaround potential to happen.
Well, as we're in this pause as well, take into account the Fire Giant still stands. The Phoenix on the left-hand side is about to respawn, but Variety's there defending it against probably there's 2-3 more minion. I think it's going to be 3 minion waves left to clear, as one is literally outside that Phoenix right now.
And Ymir, while he does great against clearing waves, especially in the early game with that ice carpet, in the late game when those minions have extra health, especially fire minions, he's not going for this super damage-oriented build because you could see how much of Orbit's strategy is killing Variety on this Ymir. He's had to go for these sort of tanky items. It takes him a long time to clear those fire waves. He probably does have his teleport up.
He does have teleport still.
Yeah, he will have his teleport
here we go.
available.
The Fire Giant has been pulled on Orbit. They were in a great position after picking off Ataraxia in that last fight. They will get the Fire Giant for the second time this game. Their hopes, their dreams are still alive right now. They need to win all 3 in a row, and right now they're in a good position to do so.
Even if they don't win all 3, they do still drop down to the group stage. They aren't dead in the water, but it makes their path to the hi-rez expo exponentially harder.
I'd call it dead.
Just because
I think the group stage is going to be so tough if you get to sit and watch all the other teams play and they get to see your strats that you had to pull out because you were 0-2 down. Well then, you're going to be in an awkward spot. But Orbit, they're looking for the middle Phoenix.
There, it is Rod of Tahuti completed now for Lawbster on this Poseidon. So those Krakens and Whirlpools going to be even more potent. No penetration though. Oh, excuse me. He actually sold his Soulstone and has the full Obsidian Shard
Did that
as well.
a lot earlier on. He did that a lot earlier on, so he had that in his kit. Left-hand side, Twig is defending the left-hand Phoenix, which is still a weakened state. Trixtank going to stun varieties. PandaLike going to disarm too. And Funballer immediately uses Desert Fury. PandaLike going to answer back with an ultimate of his own and force a reset. And now with QvoFred jumping away, in leaps PandaLike. And the wall up to Trix is good. The Kraken does some work, but Prime does more.
That's a big snipe. Like I was mentioning, we hadn't seen it yet from PrettyPriMe. Finally we do on that Phoenix defense. No Phoenix is down, and the rest of Orbit turns tail.
Great start, though, for Obey in that fight, because now you saw the pings on the left-hand side. That was from Obey saying there's a fire minion wave still on the left-hand side. We need to go and deal with that at some point, because otherwise that Phoenix will fall. But it's going to take a little while with that minion wave there, so they should be in a good enough position right now. But with the Fire Giant being offline now, with Trixtank dying, they've got 4 members with it, but they've got to wait for him to respawn.
And you can see the build from Trixtank is very much hybrid. It's not your traditional support build whatsoever. The Voidstone sure helps out the team a little bit because you're reducing the enemy's magical protections, but he's gone for a damage-oriented item with Celestial Legion Plate Helm as well.
Yeah.
So he does have protections, but he does have the ability to get exploded like we saw there.
Well, Funballer here is going to try and solo the Gold Fury nice and quick. He's got the Fire Giant, obviously, so Obey going to play defensive, and this will allow the Gold Gap to climb in favor of Orbit for the time being, but we're still an even game.
No worries about giving up this Gold Fury if you're on Obey. Most of you have all 6 items. You can see that PrettyPriMe working on his last item, as is Variety, but CaptainTwig is completely full slotted, as is Ataraxia. You're not worried about that Gold Fury whatsoever. It's much more important to make sure that waves aren't too close to your Phoenixes. You're not looking to fight anyone by any stretch right now, but you want to make sure that it takes Orbit a little bit longer to get to your Phoenix with a minion wave.
And that's the big key here, is Orbit want the weakened Phoenix on the left-hand side. The Fire Giant buff isn't going to last too much longer, but probably enough for them to take this Phoenix down. But they may take some casualties like they have the previous times they've gone for this objective.
They've got about a minute left on this Fire Giant engage here, so you're right. They've got enough, and this Phoenix is weakened.
Keep an eye on CaptainTwig on the mini-map as well. You can see him round near the middle Phoenix. The moment he ults, he'll be looking to go aggressive, and Orbit will look to fall back if they can spot him.
Twig has not had the greatest of ultimates, but that one that he hit in the last fight set everything up for Prime, and it's no surprise that when Twig hits the big ultimate that he needs to, Obey win the fight.
Player damage, 20,000 online for Lawbster. Keep an eye on the Krakens coming through. There is a shell available in a few seconds, so that will be available before the Kraken is used, as PandaLike going to eat a bit of free poke. Great wall from Twig. Triple taps. Tasty.
Feels good, and now it's going to be a back up from Orbit. They've got about 25 seconds left on this Fire Giant. It looks like they're done. They don't want any more. They'll wait for the next fight.
I think they're just trying to lure the boys of Obey out of the base a little bit and then charge back in. Trixtank leading the pack here. Doesn't have a blink available, but does have that sprint, which is available for him. If you can get a good wall off, he'll be looking for it. It seems he wanted Variety, but actually it's PandaLike left alone now. The wall was not in the correct position, and CaptainTwig could be coming down, and he's on to Quvo, who's forced to jump away. Trixtank is going to be fine to leap away as well for now, but it looks like Obey want more.
PandaLike jumping in, Funball throws it out. Turnaround here from Orbit. They're going to go in with Fear No Evil. Ataraxia in the backside. Sustain coming out from PrettyPriMe for now. Another double
tap
wall.
on 2 as well. He's going to get a purification of Funballer. They want PandaLike, however, who's been isolated in the jungle. They'll pick him up. Kraken, meanwhile, from Lawbster will remove CaptainTwig. 2 members down on the side of Obey. And Orbit, don't forget it's 35 minutes. Look at those respawn timers. Over 50 seconds on 2 of them.
No Fire Giant, no problem for Orbit. They find 2 picks now, 8 kills in total. But it looks like they don't want this middle Phoenix, so they could just wrap around here. The same sort of idea.
There's a ward, however, and Variety's going to see it and freeze only 1. Trixtank ate that. Variety going to drop a ward to stop the damage coming down. The laser hit onto Lawbster a little bit there. That'll tickle his fancy. Xaliea, a little bit low on Martyr here, however, so it looks like Orbit are going to have to fall back.
No meditation for him either, so he would need to use that teleport in order to come back in that fight with a significant amount of mana. That fight was just so spread out for all of Obey. No one was really in there together. CaptainTwig had a good idea by going in. Oh,
Trixtank's in a lot of trouble. He's not going to get away from that Fear No Evil. Ataraxia trades, though, as a big crit from Funballer hits home. I don't think they'll be too upset by that, honestly. Ataraxia for Trixtank,
Worth.
I'm fine.
Worth 100%. Now
Oh,
might be
variety.
variety as well. Slow from somersault, nowhere to go.
he
Qvo's gonna
jumps the
pick him
monkey.
up as well.
Oh, Qvo jumps to the monkey. He's going to go in prime as well, but instead he's going to do the correct thing, go towards the fire giant here. Orbit can take this for free unless PandaLike has anything to say. It's 13 seconds on his wrath, but will the fire giant still be standing in that time? I don't think so. It's going to be close.
7-5, he's looking for it. The rest of the team is still on fire giant.
He's watching it and he's looking at it, and their boys know that he's there. They've played since season 1. Qvo, Xaliea will know exactly what PandaLike's game plan was there, and they're going to deny it.
Another fire giant, 3 fire giants for Orbit, 3 gold furies for Obey, but I'll be honest, I'd rather have 3 fires at 35 minutes into the game. Still though, only 1 Phoenix down, and Obey has had done a good job overall of defending their Phoenixes whenever the other team has fire.
And one of the reasons for doing that is making sure they push out these minion waves. And look what CaptainTwig did the whole time. He knew he couldn't get fire, so what he did was he made sure on the left-hand side he pushed that wave all the way out. That means that those minion waves will slow them down, which means they don't have to defend too much if the boys of Orbit and their new fresh fire giant buff want to march onto a different lane.
Lawbster has played this game so well. He's been very patient with his Krakens in the later stages of the game.
This is why they picked it. You can see it. This game is why they picked it for him in game 1. Game 1, didn't really see anything. This time, he's hitting them. He's hitting decent whirlpools the whole time too.
That's been the big one, is his whirlpool positioning. It's been, the focus has been onto variety
Watch
entirely.
the walls, and the wall this time from Variety will be a defensive one as the pillar came down from Funballer too.
But Trix used his ult there. He was looking to pick variety, but he threw up the wall and was able to get out of dodge in time. So that lockdown potential a little bit less now for Orbit.
And you mentioned it was for Variety there. Well, they've kind of telegraphed that a lot here, Orbit. When you saw Trixtank running forward, he's always looking at the Ymir like, I want you. And when you see that coming, you kind of know what's going to happen, so you can counter it.
But how much has Variety been able to do that? He's sitting at 0-5 and 5.
Got isolated and ate some poke, but the Impiller from Funballer will make sure there's no follow-up damage from the boys of Obey. Funballer's pillars are fantastic right now.
But Qvo's Purification is down, and Twig is going to be looking for him with that Anvil of Dawn. If he can get that directly into a snipe, no Sanctuary is going to help Qvo.
Well, there's a big old minion wave coming down that left-hand side, and it's all fire minions heading towards the base. There's one more normal wave of minions for Obey to defend against that fire minion wave, but then that Phoenix is going to need some help, and that's why Twig's already on his way over. It's a 4v5.
Twigs is just looking for that ultimate, but PandaLike in a little bit of trouble. Variety. Xalia's in a lot of trouble, taking a lot of damage.
Luckily enough, the wall was down, and Twig, we already said, was up, but he's going to get Purification out of Lawbster. Wall only going to hit onto Xaliea, but Xaliea walks away. PandaLike uses his ultimate as well. That's Twig's ultimate and PandaLike's ultimate on cooldown.
And tell me if you've heard this one before. Orbit just backs up, waits for you to engage, and then that's when they're going to turn and burn. That's it. Obey has seen it before as well. Trixtank going in, big stun coming out with
PandaLike in a lot of trouble after that leap. He's got no escape. Now the snipe hit too from PrettyPriMe, but it was on the tankier targets. QvoFred out of the fight too. The Phoenix in mid still stands. Left-hand Phoenix weakened, but still stands as well.
But there is a fire wave coming from the left-hand side, so that Phoenix is not going to stand for long unless someone goes over there to try and defend it.
And when
Obey,
they do, the
forced
boys
to make
of
a
Orbit
choice.
will go in for the middle one. Great wall from Twig, but QvoFred removes Twig from the battlefield again. Prime doing his best to slow them down as a mighty Kraken comes out from Lawbster. Airstrike away from Ataraxia, middle Phoenix falls, and the left will surely follow.
Where did Twig go? He was half HP.
I believe that was
Hydra's
crit.
Hydra's crit with Deathbringer, exactly. Huge play.
Talking about crits, blink freeze from Variety, looking for the damage, but not going to find Funballer. Instead, Variety's in an awkward spot. Has to ult himself, gain support from Ataraxia and Prime, however, but they can't find the mark with the damage, and Prime's in trouble, stunned, even though Sanctuary's inside the whirlpool. The chicken is in trouble. The laser beam of death won't save anyone. Lawbster gets credit for another kill. A double kill for Lawbster. That's what the boys of Orbit needed if they want to stay in this. If they want to go to Worlds, they had to fight back, and fight back they did.
6-0-9. The Lawbster on this Poseidon. He's not throwing out lobsters though. It's a big giant fish eating him up. 30k player damage from him. That time the composition works for Orbit and they find a must-win game.
So game 2 there, when I'm looking at it back aggro, what I really saw out of the picks and bans, first of all, is that they banned Capri Orbit instead of the Hun Batz. What happens? Hun Batz gets drafted, and those Fear No Evils really made an influence in that game.
They banned the Kepri instead of Hun Batz or Guan Yu. I mean, Xaliea was so impactful on that Guan Yu in game 2. there again in game 1, and all 3 games have been a Guan Yu pick for Orbit. It was Trixtank on it game 1, 2 and 3, it's been Xaliea, and it's just been so impactful with those conviction heals. You could see Orbit get 1 pick, back up and heal. 1 pick, back up and heal, and you just bait Obey into fights over and over and over again, and eventually it pays off and they get the Titan.
Pays off indeed. So they've got 1 game under their belt now, the boys of Orbit. Obey have 2, however, and I guess that's the big key here is that you've got to take each game as it comes now.
Exactly, that's all you can do. Right now, you're not thinking about the fact that you need 3 in a row. It's like,
1.
okay, we won 1, let's just get another one. That's all you got to do.
Well, let's find out what the analysts had to say about that game as Obey bring it back. Rain Day, what have you got to say?
Well, that was an exciting one for us here to watch behind the scenes. Obey finding not a lot of luck there for Orbit. They actually get a win. It was 2-0 to Obey, and finally Orbit have started to find their rhythm. And I think that is the most important thing that we saw here. It seems like Orbit are starting to click, and Obey have lost a little bit of that spice that they had going into the first couple of games.
You got to start somewhere. So now Obey getting that first, Orbit getting that first win is so important for them to start the ball rolling. They need to find 2 more. And finally, QvoFred did get his Hun Batz that he's known to play aggressive with. Now, I would say personally that this game was more about Obey getting a little bit too more comfortable.
Yeah, I think that Obey kind of went into that autopilot mode where they thought that the game was already won. You could see when they had the lead early on in that game, or not necessarily early on, but like in the mid stages of that game, they were really comfortable and confident. You know, you could see Twig, PANDALIKE, and Variety, all 3 of them just having the emotes, the clapping, the taunts, the laughs. But nobody was laughing after that 23-minute Fire Giant was snuck by Orbit.
It was a great play from Orbit. This is that land seasoned veteran team that we know Orbit is capable of. You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. So off of that Fire Giant, they were down about, what, 7,000 gold, something like that. And then they managed to start coming back by knocking out the towers, getting back into the game, and then just capitalizing on all the missed abilities from both CaptainTwig and PrettyPriMe.
There were a lot of opportunities there on the left-hand Phoenix or the right-hand side, depending on your perspective, when they were defending there the siege, and it ended up being a crucial raw snipe was missed. They get the left Phoenix, even to the later stages of the game where, you know, some abilities are hit, but they're not hit at the right time. And PANDALIKE jumps in and onto 4 and unfortunately goes down quickly, and then no real tank on their side there. So talk to me about, I think, the confidence. I think for me that was the biggest point here. Overconfidence by Obey at the mid part of that game. Was that like something that they actually deserved to be having, or did they get a little ahead of themselves?
They definitely got a little bit more ahead of themselves, I would say, because as a player, you have to play what's given to you. You're in a best of 5, you're in the closeout game. Sure, you might have a winning position, but you weren't in the Titan room with a deicide under your belt. You weren't about to close out this set. You were still having to go through the bumps and the bruises if you're the side of Obey. So now they're in a position where, like, all right, we were winning, now we lost, and now we have to go into game number 4 with a different mindset. Like, now we cannot have that same kind of taunting mentality. We have to take every game for what it's worth.
Yeah, a little bit of deja vu coming out for PANDALIKE and Variety there, thinking that it's already won, like I said, but at the same time, this is still Orbit that we're talking about here. This is still a very top 3 team of EU, and they can definitely reverse sweep this if Obey don't respect them. And I think that that's probably going to be the priority for Obey in this 4th game, is that they're just really going to want to prioritize being careful with the situations and making sure to not overextend or like overconfidently play their picks.
And speaking of